It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo, what is up, everybody? So my new little buddy here, my little guy, we're going to be chilling in my office. Well, he doesn't want to do anything but cause chaos right now, but this is my little guy, Luke. We just picked him up today. He's only 8 weeks old. Little guy. He's a silver lab for all the people that are going to freak out. But, yeah, cool little dude right here. So, all right, let's get him out of here because he's going to cause chaos. And hopefully you guys are all doing well today. Hold on just a sec. He's going crazy here.
It's like the Zoom channel each other.
Yeah. My wife just came in to get the dog right now, and she says it's like those videos. You remember seeing the Zoom videos where like the person's doing a newscast or something from their home, and then like the little kid comes in on all this different stuff. Yeah, that's pretty funny. But yeah, it's a trip. It's like having a little baby again. Like every 2 seconds. I'm sure we're not going to sleep very well tonight and all that good stuff, but the family's going to be super stoked about it. So yeah, get out of here. That's right. So yeah, hopefully you guys are doing well. I'm doing pretty good over here. Had a nice weekend. Had like my daughter was sick over the weekend. I mean, it's all good. She's fine. It was just a cold, but it was kind of a bummer because it was her birthday. But it's funny how things work out. So we had to change plans, but it all ended up working out. We ended up painting her bedroom for her, which she was super stoked about, and just had a nice family relaxing weekend. So it's really cool. Yeah, it's just nice. And the weather's kind of a trip out here in Southern California today. It's like cloudy and it's about to rain. Yeah, it's weird how this stuff's happening. I mean, not weird. I mean, it's fall. That's what happens. But just rain in California. We haven't gotten it officially yet, but it looks like it's going to rain. So it's definitely a trip. But yeah, so as usual, guys, I got a bunch of stuff I want to cover on my little list of things to talk about, and I definitely want to get to the chat too. So if you guys have questions and things that you want me to cover, topics you want me to cover, do me a favor and hit caps lock and put them in the chat. That helps me to try to see them a little bit better. keep reposting them until I answer them, and or myself or one of the moderators tells you to stop posting them. If I miss your question, feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I'll try to get back to you there too. A lot of the times when you guys send me emails and comments on my videos, if I see something that's live stream worthy, then I'll cover it on the live stream. So most of the things, actually all of the things on my list right here, are questions or emails or comments that people left, and I just usually shoot that person an email or a link saying, hey, I'm going to cover your question on the live stream, and then we'll go at it, you know, and try to cover it. So JJMN asks if I would recommend the Fieldpiece SC680 meter. And yes, I would recommend it. Now, I personally don't use the SC680 because it's a little bit too big for me. I use the SC480. Okay, the SC480 is a clamp meter with phase rotation. It does all the electrical stuff that you need it to do, capacitance, all that. It checks the frequency, it does all that, but it doesn't have a swivel head, and it does not have a dual temperature input on the display. That's all. So if you need the dual temperature, you need the swivel head, then yeah, you want to go for the SC680. It's a great meter. It's just a little too big for my taste. The 480 is perfect for me, and it handles everything I need it to handle. Now, let me be fair. I get a lot of people all the time, you know, in the comments or in the chat or whatever, that say, get rid of the Fieldpiece trash and go to Fluke. Hey, Fieldpiece works just fine for me. But also, I have Flukes, and I have different meters that I use for different things, okay? For what I do, the Fieldpiece SC480 is perfect. It does everything I need it to do. It's perfectly accurate for what I need, and it's great. If I was doing like super scientific stuff, then I'd probably go a step above Fluke if I needed to. You know, I mean, it really depends on what you're going to be working on. And for most of HVAC, the Fieldpiece products, for me, they work great. Okay, but to each their own. They're not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. With that being said, I do have a point on here that I wanted to talk about. Let me find where it is so I can mark it off. And I'm looking. Okay, there we go. So someone had asked me, about tools in general, and I kind of wanted to talk about that. So we'll segue into that with this topic. So when it comes to the tools that we as technicians carry in our trucks and use every single day, it's going to change from person to person, and what each individual likes. My apprentice that works with me, he carries a UEI meter and he loves it. Okay. I personally don't care for it, but there's nothing wrong with it. It works fine. So that's why you see a UEI meter pop up in my videos occasionally. Usually my apprentice is doing some checking and I'm filming him with it. Okay. But, it's really about what you're comfortable with. I know there's people that swear by the UEI meters. I know there's people that hate them, and the same thing goes for Fieldpiece, and the same thing goes for Fluke. So it's really about what works best for you. Okay. Now, when it comes to new guys in the trade, I see people, the questions come through all the time. What tools should I buy? They're eager. They get out of trade school and they want to just load up their van with all the tools in the world. And I encourage technicians that are first starting out fresh to chill out with buying tools until they talk to the people that are hiring them. Okay. Now, reach out to the local companies in your area, find out what the standard is in that area. In my area, for light commercial refrigeration and air conditioning, like I do, most of the service companies provide the tools. Okay. So for instance, I make my technicians bring their tool bag with just hand tools in it, and a cordless drill and a set of gauges. That's what my technicians are responsible for bringing. They provide their meter and all that stuff. And then I give them, or provide, equip their van with torches, vacuum pumps, recovery machines, leak detectors, you name it. If we need it and it's a big ticket item, then the company is going to provide that. Okay. In my area. Now, that may change from area to area. So be careful coming out of trade school, blowing your wad on a bunch of tools, because you may find out that you don't even need them. Most of the time when people first come to work with me, I'll look at their tool bag, because they'll usually come with a tool bag, and I'll tell them, okay, you're going to trust me, get rid of all this stuff, like only have these specific items in there. When it comes to tool bags, the least amount of weight in your tool bag, the better. Okay. Because it seems like, oh, it's not that heavy. I'm a man, I can carry this, but over time that really starts to wear down on your back, your shoulders, and all that stuff. And you can get hurt, so you got to be careful about overloading your tool bags and putting in things that you absolutely don't need. I mean, if you look at your tool bag, you should use almost every item in your tool bag every 1 to 2 days. And if you're not, in my opinion, you probably need to take it out of the bag and put it in your van and just use that as a go-to item when you need it. You know, you go to the van and get it and bring it out. Try to reduce the weight. Even if, like, for instance, I've been rolling with the Vito Roller Tech Pack. It's the backpack that has wheels on it. I've been using that now for a couple months, and it's a great bag. And since it has wheels, you know, I don't really have to carry it except for when I go on the roof. And when you go to pick that thing up, it's heavy, you know, so you got to be careful about that kind of stuff. And, you know, you don't want to hurt yourself. Last year I hurt my neck, and I had to downsize my tool bags and go to almost nothing. So, just keep that in mind. Be careful about tools. Now, tools, you know, for me, they're a very important item, and I love buying tools. Okay. So I tend to have some fancy stuff. You don't necessarily need all the crazy, latest, sophisticated, top of the line gadgets. Sometimes, you know, you can make do with a set of compound gauges and different things. It just depends on what you're working on. Okay. I firmly believe that service techs should understand how compound gauges work. I used to say that they should start on their compound gauges and move to digital, but I got to be honest, the digitals, they give you so much information that, you know, I will coach my technicians with the digitals and teach them from the beginning how to use them, because, you know, they will do so much more than a compound manifold gauge set will. Okay. But it's still good to understand. Scott, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. He said, how long does it take to get the prize from those Friday guys? That's a good question, Scott. If someone, I'm assuming you're talking about on the overtime show, I'm assuming someone didn't send out your prize. That's a really good question. I don't know. I would send an email to hvacOvertime@gmail.com. You can CC me in it, hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I'll light a fire under someone's butt. I don't know if someone forgot to send you something or what, bud. Let's see what else. All right, I'm going to look at the chat here. Let me actually mark that one off my list of things to talk about. There we go. Boom. And I'm looking through the chat to see what I'm missing in here. Okay, cool. Thoughts on the new A2L slightly flammable refrigerants the EPA is mandating. Okay, so let's get this straight, Kyle. It's not necessarily that the EPA is mandating that you have to use A2L refrigerants. It's that A2L, the EPA is coming in and saying your refrigerants have to meet certain global warming potential, and or they have to be, they have to meet certain standards. So therefore the A2Ls are the best thing that's available right now. So it's not necessarily that they're mandating A2Ls. It's just that they're saying your refrigerants have to, do this and do that. And so the A2Ls at this point in time are the only thing that meet that criteria. So keep that in mind. A2L refrigerants are mildly flammable refrigerants, such as like R32. And then there's a couple other ones. A lot of them have R32 in them. You're going to start seeing it on mini split installations and stuff like that. And it's just something we have to be a little bit more cautious about. Okay, it's still a refrigerant. You still follow the common refrigeration practices, except for you want to make sure that if you're using a recovery machine or a vacuum pump, that they are A2L approved machines, that they're meant to be working with A2L refrigerants. Now, with A2L refrigerants, Brian Orr actually just did a video and podcast on this recently with Jason Objut from ESCO, and they kind of talked about this. But with the A2Ls, you have to understand they're mildly flammable, and they can combust under the right circumstances. But I mean, it's pretty extreme what would have to happen for an A2L refrigerant to catch on fire. Okay. Now, when you're dealing with hydrocarbon refrigerants, those are highly flammable refrigerants, pure butane, pure propane. Okay. That's R600 and R290. But even with those, okay, I mean, you really have to try hard in normal operation to get them to ignite. Okay. It's really about following the basic refrigeration practices. And what's interesting is that when it came to these hydrocarbon refrigerants, R290, especially, because that's what I work with all the time, when I started looking into them and I realized that we were going to have to work with them, it's like, hey, sorry, I got distracted by the chat here real quick. But anyways, with the A2Ls or with the hydrocarbons, it's really the best practices, the things you have to do to work with them are the basic fundamentals that we were taught Purge the system with nitrogen before brazing. Cut out as many components as possible. Now, when it comes to the hydrocarbons and the A2Ls, you know, what they want to do is, you know, especially with the hydrocarbons, they want to have spark-free condenser fan motors. They're going to try to do everything they can to eliminate a potential ignition point. Okay, so you know, they're not going to typically use wire nuts anymore. They're going to use Wago connectors, different things like that. There's pluses and minuses to all the different stuff, but really, when you read the installation instructions for a hydrocarbon system and the basics that you're supposed to follow, it's the stuff that we should have been following from the beginning, with a few other added things. Have a fire extinguisher handy, be in a well ventilated area. When it comes to hydrocarbon refrigerants, right, that's the isobutane and R290, which is unodorized propane. Those ones you can legally, now let me preface this, understand this is just with the hydrocarbon ones. You can legally vent those into the atmosphere. You do not recover the hydrocarbon refrigerants. Now, you're still going to recover the A2L refrigerants because they still are, you know, not allowed to be vented into the atmosphere. So with that being said, you need to make sure you have an A2L certified recovery machine and vacuum pump, okay? So, but it's nothing too crazy. I mean, I wouldn't be worried about it. And for those of you that say, well, I just refuse to work on them, because I do see that. I see people out there saying, I don't want to work on any of these. Well, you're going to need to go ahead and hand in your tool bag, because A2Ls and hydrocarbons at this point in time, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, are the future, okay? Until the hippies have more regulations that make us get rid of the A2Ls and the hydrocarbons. And don't get me wrong, that will come in too, okay? There will come a point when you can't use hydrocarbon because they'll figure out a reason why that's bad, and they'll figure out a reason why the A2Ls are bad too. But with that being said, we're refrigeration technicians. Our job is to evolve with the industry. When things change, we change. We up our education, we learn new stuff, and we're the technicians that are going to fix things. So the cool thing, knowing that eventually the A2Ls are going to go away and eventually the hydrocarbons are going to go away, guess what? There's going to be something new that we're going to have to be here to learn, and it's going to make us even more valuable. Okay, so keep that in mind. Change is inevitable. There's nothing we can do about it. I'm just as stubborn as the next guy. I don't like change, but it is what it is, okay? So with that being said, if you do air conditioning and refrigeration, if you don't already do this, you really need to start focusing on saturation temperatures, all right? Pay attention to the saturation temperatures, because with every different flavor of refrigerant, the pressure temperature relationship is going to change. So if you're one of those guys, which I have been for the longest time, or used to be for the longest time, that focused on strictly R22, strictly 134A, and strictly 404A for the longest time, that's all I worked with. I knew exactly what the pressure should be for this, for that, for this. But when you transition into these new refrigerants, you're going to realize that there's so many refrigerants in our trucks now. You're going to be straining your brain trying to remember all the different pressures that they run. So if you just focus on the temperatures, and you know that, you know, the typical air conditioner is going to run anywhere from, you know, at the lowest end, a 38-degree evaporator coil all the way up to a 55-degree evaporator coil for air conditioning, depending on what you're working on. And, evaporator temperatures on refrigeration and freezers and different things like that, then you're going to be much better off, because I don't think much better off is a word, but you're going to be doing a lot better than the next guy when you start understanding the pressure temperature relationship and start focusing on saturation temperatures versus just the pressures, okay? So I'll get off my soapbox on that one. Definitely lots of cool stuff going on in the chat, and thanks everybody for being in here. I really appreciate everybody's support. You guys are awesome. And I know I keep changing things with the videos and stuff, but thank you for being so patient with all that stuff. My mind, as you can tell, I kind of go all over the place, up and down, changing my mind on a daily basis. I want to do this, I want to do that. I'm a little bit crazy in the head, so that's just kind of how it is. My good buddy Ty Brannaman just released a video, and it was a pretty, I would say, edgy video. Okay, Ty's an educator. If you guys don't already subscribe to his YouTube channel, you definitely want to do it. And in fact, I'm going to pull up his channel right now and throw a link in the chat. So hang on, Ty Brannaman. Here's his channel right now. Do me a favor, and if you haven't already, go over and subscribe to Ty's channel and tell him I sent you over. He's a really cool dude, and I had the honor of meeting him at the Kalos training event, or the HVACR school training event, 2 years ago. But I've always appreciated Ty's enthusiasm and efforts that he puts into educating people. So Ty had a pretty controversial, edgy kind of a video about for-profit private trade schools. Now, it's not all of them, and he did a good job of outlining the way that some of these schools are structured and how some of them work. Okay. And it's pretty interesting. So if you guys haven't already, go look at his recent video. It's about trade schools, and give his channel a subscription and check it out. I have been preaching for the longest time about trade schools, right? Whether it be for-profit or non-profit. So you have community college trade schools, and then you have for-profit private schools. Both of them can be good. Both of them can be bad. Okay. It's our job and or your job as future technicians or technicians that are trying to better yourself to know when a school is leading you down the wrong direction. Okay. Be very cautious about schools, and Ty kind of breaks it down in his video, so trust me, go watch it. But be very cautious about schools that will not give you refunds, schools that will not give you options to back out of the program, and different things like that. The cool thing, and again, I'm for any education, because any education, in my opinion, is better than no education. So whatever you got to do to get that education, good for you. If your best bet is to go to a for-profit trade school and pay the, $15,000 to $25,000, $30,000, whatever it costs, I don't know, it's different from area to area, then so be it. Okay. Just be careful about some of these schools and make sure it's something that you can either back out of and or something that you're really going to like, because once you pay that money, you need to make sure if you decide you don't want to do it anymore that you can get it back, or what your options are. So just be cautious about that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, me personally, I went to Mount San Antonio Community College in Walnut, California. At the time, I still think they have one of the best HVACR training programs in Southern California. There's a couple different ones: San Bernardino Valley College, Mount San Antonio Community College, and Cypress Community College, in my opinion, and from what I've heard from other people, all have great refrigeration and air conditioning programs. Okay. Now, the cool thing about the community college classes is oftentimes they offer night school, and you don't have to make a commitment to the whole program all at once for the most part. For myself, I was working in the trade already, and I went to night school after work. So I would go 2 days a week, usually like Monday, Wednesday, and then a class maybe on Thursday or something like that. And I would go from like 6 to 10 at night. And it was really beneficial for me because I was able to work during the day and learn, and then go to school and then learn too. And it was convenient for me to be able to take what I needed. And then come summertime, I would take the summer off and then start taking the classes again in the fall. That's what worked for me. Now, again, I'm not saying that for-profit trade schools are all bad. They're not. I know people that swear by some of them. There's local ones to me that people love. Okay. So whatever floats your boat and whatever works for you, good on you. Just do your due diligence, do your research, ask people. Ty made some great points. He said, when you're walking up to one of these schools before you enroll, see the students that are leaving classes after the day or whatever, go talk to them. Talk to the people getting in their cars and ask them, hey, what do you think of the program? What do you think? What's the hands-on lab work? Do they have a lot of lab work? Do you guys do a lot of book work? Do you watch a lot of videos? Do they just make you guys watch videos all day? Guys, you would be surprised. I'm not going to name any schools, but I get emails from people, and it's flattering, but at the same time, it's disturbing, because I get emails from students saying, hey man, my teacher's been playing your videos every single day in class. We watch 3 of them a day, all this stuff. And it's like, and then I'll get into conversations with some of the people, and it's like, do you guys do anything other than watching my videos? Oh, well, sometimes we just watch your videos and that's it. And it's like, wow, I appreciate that people are watching my videos, but I don't know if that's quite what trade school is supposed to be for. You need to get your hands on things. You need to learn the fundamentals, because I'm not teaching necessarily the nitty gritty and the fundamentals in my videos. I'm showing service work, practical service work at that. Okay. So understand that there's the textbook way to do things, and there's sometimes practical ways of doing things, right? Because we can't always follow every single textbook thing when we're out in the field. Sometimes things just don't work that way. But I think it's so important that people understand the book side of it. They understand the right way to do it. So that way, if they do take shortcuts and they have to skip steps, they know the repercussions of it. So just keep that in mind and do your due diligence and research. And if you guys haven't already, go check out Ty's channel. It's a great channel. Okay. Let me get to the chat and see what I'm missing in here. We got a lot of action going on, and it's hard for me to pay attention to everything and keep up with it. So let's see if my computer will catch up with things right now. It is dragging butt right now for some reason, loading certain things. We'll keep going with this. Would I recommend, I saw a question, would I recommend job link system or analog gauges with separate sophisticated temperature sensors? May already gotten into it when I read this. I'm probably going to go towards the job link system. Okay. Now understand something. I want everybody to understand the fundamentals, and you need to understand how a compound manifold gauge works. And to be honest with you, everybody should have a compound gauge set in their trucks. Okay. There's certain things that compound gauges are still good for, especially when you're field adjusting pressure switches while the system is still operating. A compound manifold gauge set is so much more accurate than using a digital gauge set, because they have like sampling rates and rates at which it takes measurements on the digital ones, and it's not quite as fast as the instant reaction that you see on a compound manifold set. So whenever I'm using, or if I'm going to do pressure setting or intricate adjustments on pressure controls, then I'll go get a compound gauge from my van. I actually, to be fair, I don't carry an entire manifold anymore. I just have stubby gauges, high and low side, and I'll throw them on there and adjust the pressure controls accordingly. Okay. But I'm probably going to push people more towards the digital sets because of the things that you can do with them. But something to be very, I think it's so important that we understand this. If you're going to use digital gauges, you have to know what you're doing. Digital gauges using Measure Quick or the Fieldpiece Job Link app, all those things, they're great. And it's cool what you can put them on the system, you know, but I'm afraid that there's too many companies out there that think, especially with the job issue right now with technician shortage and all that stuff, we can't just throw a guy that doesn't know what he's doing into a van, hand him a digital gauge set and try to walk him through it over the phone. We're going to run into problems with that, okay? Because as a technician, we have to know how to interpolate the data that comes out of our digital job link set or digital gauges or testo set or whatever we're using. What happens if we accidentally install the liquid line temperature clamp on the discharge line because we don't know the difference? And then our superheat is out, I mean, our subcooling is out of the charts, right? That can lead us down a rabbit hole of removing refrigerant, doing this, doing that, when, oh, the technician just made a mistake and he put it on the wrong line. So we have to know how to interpolate the data and say this isn't right. Okay, it's really important that we understand that. So let's look at the chat and see what I'm seeing inside here right now. How often do I service restroom exhaust fans? I don't know, bud. It really depends on how often they come in. I mean, that's a hard one. Once a year, twice a year, maybe. You know, it's hard. When I recover R22, do I have to send it to be scrubbed, or can you reuse it? JJ, if I remember correct, no, you can only reuse it on the same piece of equipment at the same customer's location, if I remember the EPA laws correctly. I don't even think you're allowed to use it on the same site on different equipment. I think you're supposed to recover the gas, either send it off to be recycled and or to be disposed of, or you can put it back into the same piece of equipment. But it's been a long time since I took my EPA test, so I'm sure someone will correct me in the chat. Let's see what else we got going on in here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get to my list of things to talk about. So Brandon, before the stream, had sent me an email, and he was asking about multi-stage carrier package unit. And he sent me a model number, and he says it has a Jade controller. The unit has 2 compressors and a VFD. And his question is, what speed should the blower be running at with 1 compressor on, low or high? He says that he mostly works on residential, and he's not best with commercial equipment. And he's noticing that when the way it's set up right now is that when 1 compressor is running, it runs on low speed, and then when the second compressor comes on, it runs on high speed, but then his pressures change in the system, and he was curious how that works. So let's explain this. All right. For years, we have had multi-stage package units. They have multiple compressors in there. Thank you, Scott. Scott said to smash the like button. I really appreciate that, okay? So the Jade controller is just an economizer controller. It's a super simple economizer controller. I'm going to tell you, if you do install a Jade controller, your eyes are going to be open to how easy it is to operate. Be prepared to go through outdoor air sensors like they're nothing, okay? Majority of the time, depending on where you live, if you live in a very moist environment where you have a lot of humidity and stuff, you're probably going to go through outdoor air sensors once to twice a season, okay? It's just the name of the game with it. Now, when it comes to the airspeed on our package units, all right, let's step back to the infancy of our trade. We started making package units and we put multiple compressors in it, and or we put a single compressor with unloaders, which essentially is a way to shut off half the compressor. That's the easiest way to explain it if you have unloaders, okay? The idea of multi-stage equipment is that you conserve energy. When you have a demand and high building temperatures, you might turn on one compressor, and then after so much time, there's typically an algorithm, whether it be in the package unit or in the AC, after so much time, if the temperature's not met, then it's going to turn on the second compressor, or it's going to turn the compressor on full blast, basically, okay? Now, we do that to save energy and to maintain building comfort easier. If you have a package unit that both compressors come on right when it turns on, you're going to see a high peak on the energy usage, and you can run into comfort cooling problems where you overcool the building really quick and it short cycles back and forth, okay? So we do multi-stage equipment to reduce that. So that way we can use the algorithm, like I said, whether it be in the thermostat or in the package unit. With that being said, for the longest time, we had evaporator fan motors that ran at one speed the entire time, okay? And we're dealing with multi-speed evaporator fan motors now, and in fact, it's an energy code in California. But on the single-speed evaporator fan motors, you have to understand that on average, okay, it can change from region, but let's just make it easy. You want to move about 400 CFMs of air through the evaporator coil, right, for every 1 ton of refrigeration, okay? So if you have a 5-ton unit, you typically want to see 2,000 CFMs of air moving through that evaporator coil. Now, with that being said, what happens if we have multi-stage equipment? So we have 2 5-ton compressors and it's now a 10-ton system. Well, 2,000 CFMs of air is not necessarily going to be enough air for that system, depending on how it's designed. So we have to speed it up, and we might have to do 4,000 CFMs now. But here's the problem. When we're running on just one compressor, we were running on 4,000 CFMs of air on a 10-ton unit, and that could be a problem, all right? That's going to affect the efficiency of the unit and how it cools the building. It may not dehumidify correctly. It may not operate correctly, okay? So we started putting in 2-speed evaporator fan motors. And the theory is that if only one compressor is running, we're not going to waste all that energy running that evaporator fan motor at high speed anymore. We're going to slow it down to low speed. So to answer your question, on a 2-speed system, it's going to run on low speed when one compressor is running. It's going to run on high speed when both compressors are running, okay? That's on a 2-stage system, and it may change a little bit. There's typically, in his system has a VFD. It's a carrier package unit, so it's factory programmed typically, and you can adjust it. Just be careful. It's a pain in the butt. To adjust the carrier ones with the VFDs, you got to get a special adapter for the ABB drive to be able to plug it in there because they don't come with them. And Big Pond Cable Guy, thank you so very much for that super chat. And thanks again, man. He said to smash the like button. So please, guys, do so. So we do the 2-speed evaporator fan motors to save energy and to make the equipment more efficient and operate better. So it is normal for it to slow down to low speed, whatever the factory predetermined and or you changed it to, okay? In as far as his question said, how many CFMs of air should it be moving? Well, it really depends on your particular situation and how your building was balanced. Did balance technicians change everything? Was it correct? Did engineers spec what the airflow should be? Worst case scenario, stick with what the factory has it programmed for. So I hope I answered your question, bud. Feel free to send me another email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com, if I didn't answer it completely, okay? Let's cross that one off here. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. What am I missing? All right, I'm not missing anything as of yet. Any advice for VRF systems? Honestly, besides working on mini splits, I've never worked on a VRF system. So I don't work on any of the big stuff, so I'm not going to be the technician to give advice on that one. What I would suggest you do, there's not a new guy. He's actually been making videos for a little while now. And he has a lot of great commercial videos, and he does commercial industrial stuff. And the channel name is HVAC Time. Cool dude. His name is slipping my mind at the moment, but I do know it because him and I have exchanged emails together. But go check out his channel. I post the link in the chat right now. It's a great channel. He does VRF stuff. He does chiller work, stuff like that. So check it out. He's got some great information, and he might be able to help you a little bit more with some of your questions, okay? I'm just reading through my phone right now. Okay, cool. Nothing important. Something to keep in mind, the video that I released yesterday was old footage all the way back from July. I had someone emailing me, hey, why am I using footage from July when it's October? Well, I had a super busy summer and I shot a lot of videos over the summertime. That's something that I will often do, and I'll just catalog the videos. And if I have a slow month or a slow day, I'll try to start using up some of those videos. So I usually try to let you guys know ahead of time in the beginning of the video or something like that by telling you what time it was, what the date was. That's why you see me looking at my watch a lot lately, telling people what the dates are, because I want people to understand, hey, because sometimes I'll release a video like when it's really slow in January or February and it'll be from the summer and people are like, what, it's 100 degrees? No, not at that time. So it just happens that way. VW Siphone, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. Let's see, he's asking any ideas on how to make an AC run more efficient. It's a fairly new unit, 2 to 3 olds, mid-price when installed. Very good compressor that did, very good company that did the installation. The best advice I can give you on making sure that your equipment operates properly is to have preventative maintenance done on a regular basis. Once to twice a year, have them come out, clean the equipment. That's a minimum once to twice a year, okay? Depending on your area, maybe the condenser gets really dirty, the company will recommend more what you need. But at a minimum, once to twice a year, you want someone to come out, service the equipment, clean the condensers, clean the evaporators, check the performance of the equipment. That's the best thing you can do to get it to operate as efficient as possible. Maintain the filters, change them on a regular basis. Typically, you want to change your filters at least every 30 or every 90 days at a minimum. Sometimes you have to do it more depending on the restaurant or the building or whatever. So change your filters regularly, just maintain the equipment, and if it was installed correctly, it should have a long, long life. So lately I've been working on a lot of the Heatcraft refrigeration equipment. First off, let me say something here, because I think that there's some misinformation out there. Larkin, Heatcraft, Bone, they're all the same company, okay? They're all companies that they've bought up and merged in different things at different points in time. There's a couple other ones, Chandler and a couple other names. They're all owned by Heatcraft now. It's typically the same stuff, okay? So I've been working on a lot of the older QRC systems. That is Heatcraft's quick response controller. That one is a dumbed down beacon system. And I had some questions about if I've been running into a lot of problems with those systems. And let me explain that Heatcraft actually got rid of the QRC system and they made the new system, which is intelligent. Okay, so QRC is no longer sold to my understanding, and now it's the intelligent system. But with the QRC, am I having a lot of problems? No, not necessarily. I have at least 30 no, maybe not 30. Well, yeah, I would say that's safe to say 30 evaporators out there with the QRC system on it. And whether it be walk-in freezers or coolers. And the majority of the time, the failures that I have seen are sensors, okay? Sensors or frozen up or different things like that. And it usually has to do with customers leaving doors open and different stuff. I've had 2 expansion valve issues. Cross my fingers, I've had no circuit board issues. The expansion valve issues were both failed coils or stators for the EEVs. And one of them was one of my issues that I had on a QRC system was self-inflicted because I didn't follow the installation instructions correctly, and I over pressurized the system with nitrogen, and I ruined a what do you want? I'm having a brain fart right now. Transducer, the pressure transducer. I ruined one, so I had to change that, but that was my own fault. So I really don't have a lot of problems with the QRC systems. Now, the first QRC system that I installed was the first system with an EEV, an electronic expansion valve. And from that point forward, I realized and made sure that whenever we're doing these installs, we purge and braze with nitrogen every single time, okay? To try to eliminate anything from getting into the EEVs to plug up the screens and different things like that. So I'm always trying to follow proper practices when I'm working with the EEV systems, to even more so than a normal system, because I want to make sure that nothing's messing up those valves, okay? And then just follow the installation instructions, you know, proper piping, P-traps, and all that stuff. But for the most part, I've been extremely lucky with them and have not had very many issues at all. I do want to cover something that I get quite often in my YouTube chat, people addressing the way that I defrost evaporator coils. You get hit and miss on both sides. Again, whatever floats your boat, whatever makes it work for you guys, okay? For me, when I'm defrosting evaporator coils, I use a water hose with hot water typically, okay? Sometimes they don't have hot water and I have to use cold water. I personally find that a heat gun is a waste of my time when I'm defrosting evaporators, in my opinion, okay? And heat guns can be horrible on the electrical components in the system. Oftentimes with a heat gun, what you'll see, if you ever find a video of someone using a heat gun, typically what they do is they take that heat gun and they find a way to prop it up just pointing at the coil and they go do something else, okay? I too have been guilty of doing that. Now, I don't use a heat gun unless I absolutely have to, but every time that I've tried to prop a heat gun up there, it's either fallen or it's just downright melted something in the system. I do keep a heat gun in my truck. When I used to do a lot of hospital work, I would have to use heat guns because we were on patient floors and, you know, we just couldn't bring in hoses to wash things down. But whenever possible, I try to use a water hose. Personally, I find it to be much more efficient. It's faster and it gets the job done right. Now, I had a comment recently from someone saying they hate using water hoses because it makes the biggest mess in the walk-in. Well, I don't make messes. The only time it makes a mess is usually by choice, right? And, you know, you can do things to reduce the amount of mess that you make. First off, you take water and you spray it down and you look at the drain pan. When the drain pan gets about full, you stop and you let the drain pan drain out. Okay. I don't just keep spraying and letting the drain overflow. I take all the motors out. I disassemble them, set them on the side so I can go to town. Typically when I'm defrosting an evaporator coil, I'm only defrosting it from the front side. I typically don't get to the back side unless we got a dirty coil. So I'll take that hot water and spray it in from the front, and it actually steams off the ice on the back, and it'll usually fall off as a big chunk. So I'm not getting back there spraying the back too. I highly doubt that with a heat gun, unless you're going to take hours and hours, that you can actually defrost an evaporator from the front, okay? Now, you can occasionally make a mess on a reverse airflow coil or the slimline ceiling mounted airflow or evaporator coils. Those ones can be kind of a pain because, especially when you're cleaning them too, because the airflow is typically reversed on those. So it sucks in through the fan motors and blows out the side of the coils, okay? It has a reverse airflow. And with that being said, the inside of the coil is usually what gets dirty. So most people will walk up and look at the evaporator coil, say it's clean. No, because the air goes through the inside first. So it looks like a giant filter on the inside. Now, when you're cleaning those, you got to take out the evaporator fan motors and clean from the inside out a lot of times. If you try to clean from the outside in, it'll spray water everywhere unless you have the right wand. Now, in my video, I use that Orbit wand from Lowe's. No affiliate with that. I just use it, and I show it in my videos all the time. That thing is great because you have a mist feature, you have a shower feature. For different things, you can do different settings, and you can reduce the amount of mess that you create. Now, if I go to a walk-in cooler and it's a tile floor and the customer doesn't mind, I might just make a mess if they're okay with it, okay? Because that's the fastest way, is just go to town and spray it. But if I'm working on walk-in freezers, you typically don't want to get any water on the floor, especially if they have a raised floor. Sometimes the walk-in freezers have a metal floor. It's like 6 inches above the concrete. You do not want to get any water on that floor because eventually it'll make its way under the floor and then it refreezes and lifts the floor up. And that can be a ridiculously expensive repair that the customer has to do because you defrosted the coil and you got water all over the floor. So keep that in mind when you're working on walk-in freezers, okay? Let me see what I got going on in the chat. Why are the flue vents never covered on package units? That's a good question. A lot of times the flue vents, they'll have like a bird screen on them so birds can't fly in there, but that doesn't stop insects from flying in there. You can still get bees and wasps depending on the manufacturers. Sometimes they have a chimney kit for the package units. Actually, most manufacturers do have a chimney kit if you need it that will typically extend the flue piping higher That will be very beneficial if you have like a parapet wall or a makeup air unit nearby or outside air dampers nearby, because you don't want the flue gases making it into the conditioned space. So you can put chimney kits on them, and a lot of times the chimney kits will have covers and different things like that. But it's definitely something that we can add in the field. You just got to be careful if you're going to add an aftermarket anything to the venting for the combustion compartment of a package unit. You want to make sure that you're not going to reduce or restrict the speed of the combustible gases coming out of that vent, because that's going to make the system not work correctly. So let's get into the seasonal topic of the year. You know, I talk about these all the time, but we're coming into that season and we really need to start thinking about head pressure control valves, guys. Head pressure control valves. I know there's a lot of people that don't like these, but bottom line, they're out there and we have to maintain them. Head pressure control valve. This is the easiest one. This is an LAC valve, and I do have the Coke nose going on today. This valve right here is meant to maintain a pressure differential across our expansion valve. Simplest way to explain it, okay? With that valve in the system, right? This thing, when the pressure in the system gets below the bypass pressure, now this is an ice machine one, so the bypass pressure is 240 psi. So whenever the head pressure of the system, the high side pressure, gets below 240 psi, the bulb right here pushes down on the spring, which has a seat on top of it, and it allows refrigerant to bypass. And it takes vapor refrigerant from the compressor and dumps it into the receiver. It does that to maintain the head pressure and or pressure differential across the metering device, the expansion valve or the EEV, so that way it can operate properly. You have other methods of controlling the head pressure, fan cycling, fan speed controls, different things like that. You can definitely go that route. But with head pressure control valves, a lot of people don't understand how they work and or how to properly diagnose them. One of the most important issues that you need to understand with head pressure control valves is that they require extra refrigerant in the system. I have a very small receiver right here, okay? On this very small receiver, we have the inlet pipe coming in, and we have the outlet pipe going up the top. And notice that there's a dip tube going all the way down to the bottom of the receiver for the outlet pipe. What that dip tube does is that ensures that it pulls the liquid from the bottom of the receiver, because there will be vapor in the top of this receiver, okay? There's going to be a vapor liquid mixture. So it makes sure that when the receiver lets the gas flow out of it, it pulls liquid from the bottom of the receiver. With that being said, when we have a head pressure control valve on the system, okay, this is the LAC valve, you have OROA valves, and then you also have the individual holdback valves and different things for the higher like parallel style systems, supermarket systems. But any one of them, they're going to require extra refrigerant be in the system, because when this valve bypasses, it's going to dump vapor, again, vapor refrigerant into the receiver. When it dumps vapor refrigerant in the receiver, that can be bad, because expansion valves, whether it be an EEV or a TXV, thermostatically controlled expansion valve, have to have liquid refrigerant going to them, pure liquid refrigerant, no vapor. So if we're dumping vapor refrigerant into that receiver, that can be a problem for the expansion valve. So therefore, we have what we call the flooded charge always sitting in that receiver all year long. And I want to clarify this. If the system is properly designed and properly set up, you do not add refrigerant in the winter and remove it in the summer. You put that refrigerant in the system when you start it up, and you don't have to add any more refrigerant unless it leaks out for some reason, okay? So once you've calculated the proper flooded charge, you shouldn't have to add any more refrigerant to the system, but it's important that you understand how to properly calculate that flooded charge. The best way to understand how to calculate that flooded charge, Sporlan has a tech bulletin 90-30-1. This is only for tube and fin condensers. This is not for microchannel condensers. So tube and fin condensers, you calculate the internal volume of the condenser. You find out how much you want to flood it. It explains everything in that chart, 90-30-1. Just Google it. It's super easy, okay? So once you calculate the flooded charge, you add that to the system. And that refrigerant, there's going to be more refrigerant than that system needs typically in the summertime. It's going to have extra refrigerant always sitting in that receiver just waiting, okay? This receiver when it's designed properly, is meant to be a storage vessel. There's always going to be extra refrigerant sitting in this receiver that's typically not being used. Okay, it's just sitting there because most of the time it's not going to require all the refrigerant. So it just sits in this receiver just waiting for it to be used. Okay, so the receiver allows some refrigerant to go through, but there's going to be extra refrigerant because this is just a storage vessel. This is for when the expansion valve opens and closes. Sometimes it requires extra refrigerant, sometimes it doesn't. So when it doesn't need all the refrigerant, it just sits in the receiver waiting for the expansion valve to say, hey, I need more. And then it gives it more, okay? Because it's always available in here. Same thing goes for this head pressure control valve. When the head pressure control valves, when the outdoor conditions get low enough and the head pressure drops, this guy bypasses, it dumps vapor refrigerant into that receiver. And if we didn't have an extra liquid holding charge in there, we would feed vapor to the expansion valve and that would be a problem. So we always have the flooded charge sitting in that receiver and or winter charge sitting in the receiver waiting to be used. Okay. So once you calculate it, you throw it in there, you should never have to add any more or take it out. Now, sometimes people design systems incorrectly. Receivers aren't big enough. It's converted from another gas. There's different things that happen. But in a properly designed system, you don't take refrigerant out in the summer, put it back in the winter. You just leave it in there all year long. Okay. Now, how do we diagnose a head pressure control valve? Okay. It's actually really easy to diagnose. This is the easiest one. This is an LAC valve. Okay. So on the valve itself, there'll typically be lettering. This one, actually, the lettering's been cut off, but you're going to have one line coming from the receiver. You're going to have one line coming from the condenser, and you're going to have one line coming from the compressor. Okay. So normal operation on this guy is that the refrigerant does the normal flow. It goes through the condenser, out of the condenser, into the receiver, down to the expansion valve. But when this guy bypasses, what it'll actually do is shut off the flow coming out of the condenser. The condenser acts as a storage device because extra liquid refrigerant will back up into the condenser, which will simulate a blocked off condenser and drive the head pressure up. And then when it restricts the flow coming out of the condenser, all of a sudden it'll take discharge gas directly from the compressor and dump it into the receiver. You can feel it with your hands, okay? So if a head pressure control valve is bypassing, what you would do very carefully when the compressor's running is quickly put your fingers, just kind of touch the discharge line. You'll feel how hot it is, okay? Be careful because if you grip a discharge line, you can hurt yourself severely, okay? You can run in excess of 200 degrees sometimes on that discharge line. So just touch it. You can kind of feel it, okay? If you feel the liquid line going in, or if you feel the liquid drain coming out of the condenser is cold and the line going into the receiver is hot, the same temperature as coming out of the compressor discharge line, then you know that that head pressure control valve is bypassing, okay? You can actually see it even better, and I have some videos explaining it too. I think if you just search up head pressure control valve or something on YouTube, you'll probably come up on one of my videos, but I'll get on there with temperature clamps and show that, like, you can see that the liquid drain, which is the line coming from the condenser to the receiver, the liquid drain will be cold, right? And the discharge line will be hot, and the liquid line coming, or the line coming out of the receiver going into the receiver will be hot, just like the discharge line too, okay? So it's super easy to diagnose these because it's literally just has 3 ports, and normal operation, the discharge line goes through the condenser, so you only have a hot discharge line, then you have a lukewarm liquid drain coming out of the condenser going into the receiver. But if this is bypassing, that line going into the receiver will be red hot, just like the discharge line, and the liquid drain coming out of the condenser will be cold, okay? Again, I've got some videos explaining it. So now, what about other methods of head pressure control? Fan cycling, not a fan of, I'm not, that's not my favorite way to do it, but fan cycling, you know, you've got fan speed control. You can put motor controls on condenser fan motors and reduce the condenser fan motor speed. Just make sure that it's not going to overheat the motor and you're not going to overamp on it, okay, when you do that kind of stuff. But you can control head pressure. Sometimes you can work in an extreme condition where it's extremely cold outside and you have to do fan speed control or fan cycling and a head pressure control valve. That is possible, okay? Receiver heaters, different things like that. So keep that in mind, you know, as we come into the winter season or the fall when we start seeing head pressure control valves being used regularly. Now, what about a system that has a microchannel condenser. How do you properly charge a system with a microchannel condenser? Because you cannot use Sporland's 90-30-1 method. The easiest way that I have found to charge microchannel systems, if I want to put the proper flooded charge in there, is to lean on the manufacturer. Find out how much the maximum refrigerant charge of that system is. And oftentimes they'll tell you that, okay? If you can't get your hands on that information, what I have done is I will fill the system up with the maximum amount of refrigerant by using a heat producing device and infrared camera, and I'll add refrigerant, pump the system down, make all the refrigerant store in the receiver and the condenser. Then I'll take a heat producing device, carefully heat up the receiver, and then check the liquid level, because you'll clearly see a defined liquid level. You can actually feel it with the back of your fingers too. You just start running your fingers up the receiver, and right where it gets hot, that's the liquid level. It's as easy as that. But with a thermal imaging camera, you can see it really well. I use a thermal imaging camera. I use the FLIR 1 Pro. It's super easy. You can see everything with it. So now I will also do that because Sporland's 90-30-1 method is a great way to find out the right amount of refrigerant, but there's a flaw in that method. What happens if you walk up to a system that is not problematic, but you're doing a preventative maintenance and you notice that there's oil all over one of the lines, but the sight glass is not flashing? How do you know how much refrigerant has leaked out of that system? You don't. You can recover the entire charge and weigh the factory charge back in, or weigh in whatever the calculated charge is, but that's not necessarily practical when you're working on a system that's existing and working. So in that situation, I would just add refrigerant until I get the maximum amount of refrigerant in the system, which would be 3/4 of the receiver, about 3/4 or 80% full. Fill it up to that level, and then if that's the max amount of refrigerant you can put in the system, period. So if that's not enough refrigerant to run the head pressure control valve, then you need to fix some design issues with your system, okay? Now let's talk about new AWEF compliant refrigeration systems. So federal government's gotten involved, just like the SEER rating on air conditioning systems, and they have new energy efficiency requirements that walk-in refrigeration has to meet. I believe if it's under 3,000 square feet, I think is what the number is, that it has to meet certain AWEF compliance numbers, okay? Annual walk-in efficiency factors is what the AWEF acronym stands for. So what they're doing is they're reducing the head pressure of the system, reducing the energy consumption of the system, okay? The higher the head pressure of the system, the higher the energy usage of the system is. So if we can float the head pressure down with these head pressure control valves, then we can theoretically reduce the energy consumption of the system. But by doing that, we run into issues, okay? So I say this, and you guys, I hope people are listening, because if you're going to try to take an existing system and put an AWEF compliant condensing unit on it, but still use the same evaporator and the same TXV, you need to be careful, okay? You need to make sure that that system is designed appropriately, okay? Then at the same time, especially when you're going to some of these new refrigerants. But with that being said, your expansion valve needs to be sized appropriately with these AWEF compliant refrigeration systems, okay? Sporland has another tech document that makes that really easy. It's AWEF factors for TEVs. It's bulletin 500-10-AWEF. I don't know if that's coming up. 500-10-AWEF. You can Google these. These are free on the internet. And what you do is you look at the minimum temperature and the maximum condensing temperature. So the minimum outdoor ambient temperature and the maximum outdoor ambient temperature, and the minimum box temperature, and pay attention to the box temperature. And you're going to size an expansion valve appropriately. You want to look at the minimum required expansion valve and the maximum required expansion valve and find one that fits. That way you know it's going to be sized appropriately, because they're going to be running a lot lower head pressure on these systems, okay? Sometimes on some of these new systems, you'll see a head pressure control valve that will not bypass until it gets below 100 PSI. okay, or sometimes 150 psi. Now people ask, well, how is that going to work with these different refrigerants and all this different stuff? You're going to have to change some system design issues, okay? But most of the condensing units they're making these days is going to be for newer replacement refrigerants, i.e. 448A, okay? That's a new medium and low temperature refrigerant that we've been using, 449. There's a couple different ones, okay? But with those ones, they run lower than normal operating pressures, and it's not as big of an issue, okay? Hopefully that answers some questions. Again, if I missed anything, feel free to send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat that I'm missing. Pineapple doesn't belong on pizza. That one guy, you are dead to me, because pineapple clearly belongs on pizza, 100%, okay? My ideal pizza is pineapple, onions, bacon, and tomatoes. That right there, and some cheese. That's my pizza of choice right there. But pineapples always belongs on pizza, okay? It's a California thing, but get out of here. All right, what else we got going on? What are my thoughts on using hard start kits? Well, first off, we have to explain what we mean by hard start kit, okay? That's kind of a vague term. So on the refrigeration side, we have a 3-in-1 capacitor and relay. On the residential air conditioning side, you have a true hard start kit, which essentially is going to add a run capacitor. It's going to add a start capacitor and a potential relay to the system, and it's going to give the compressor an extra bump on startup. On either side, whether it be a refrigeration 3-in-1 or a residential hard start, either way, I'm going to lean on the compressor manufacturer first, and I'm going to try to go with the OEM starting components. Oftentimes, if you go to like the Copeland mobile app, okay, and download the Copeland mobile app if you're working with a Copeland compressor, and look up the particular compressor, they will often have optional starting components for that compressor, even if it's a residential system. I would always encourage people to go with the OEM recommended starting components for the compressor before you try to put on a universal 3-in-1 and or universal hard start. Because just because on a package from insert name of manufacturer, they say this works for all compressors 5 tons or smaller, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right starting components that Copeland or Tecumseh or insert name of compressor manufacturer here recommends, okay? Will it work? Probably, but will it cause potential damage in the future? We don't know. So you want to try to stick with what the OEM or the manufacturer says to use, okay? Now, I keep 3-in-1 refrigeration start kits for little hermetically sealed fractional horsepower compressors. I keep them in my truck and I use them for troubleshooting purposes. So I'll get the compressor to start. I'll make sure it's operating within the correct current limits, and then I'll order the OEM starting components if need be. I typically don't leave 3-in-1s and or hard starts on a system. Now, in the past though, I've done work for family and friends and had to put a hard start on a residential system. And I'll usually tell them, look, something is causing this compressor to have issues, okay? The bearings are getting tight. There's probably copper plating going on in that compressor that's causing, tightness at the bearings, and they're not, properly lubricated, or who knows, and it needs an extra bump to start the compressor. If I'm having to throw a hard start on a compressor because it won't start on its own anymore, even if it starts working, it typically means that that compressor is going bad. Now, sometimes you can put a hard start on a system and the compressor might operate for another 3-4 years, but give the customer the information and let them know this compressor's on the way out. This might buy them some time, but you have no idea how long it's going to last. But I prefer using OEM starting components on systems whenever possible. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. No fruit on pizza. You don't care. Tomatoes ain't fruit. Don't care what they say. Fruit on pineapple on my pizza all day long. That's my favorite. All right. Jonathan asks, what kind of advice I would give a trade school graduate? I get this email quite often. I have a lot of trade school kids or students that watch these videos. I can't call them kids because we have people of all ages entering this industry these days. So to a trade school grad, number one, I'm going to tell you is that understand that whatever the trade school promised you, be cautious about listening to that. Okay. Trade schools will often especially the bad ones, because there's bad trade schools out there. We kind of talked about this at the beginning. There's for-profit and non-profit, but there can be good and bad on both sides. But some of the bad schools are going to overpromise things. They're going to say that you're going to make $100,000 a year within the first year of working in the industry and all this stuff. That's not necessarily true. Okay. Understand that coming out of trade school, you're going to start in, from the ground up, and you're going to work your way up. Okay. I don't care how much you paid for that education, for the most part, unless you're like the best student in the world and you're a unicorn, you're going to start from the bottom and work your way up. Okay. You're going to start as an apprentice, and you're going to build your you're going to build your experience, and you're going to eventually become a full-fledged technician. But coming out of trade school, you do not have experience. I can tell when trade schools coach people on how to write resumes. Okay. Because every resume that I get from a student that has passed a local trade school in my area, I have a local one, and I get emails with resumes from them all the time. It says that I have experience with brazing. I have experience with troubleshooting, with working on refrigeration. I have all this experience. Okay. When I hear experience and see experience on a resume, I think that they're truly experienced in the trade. What I've been seeing though, is that the schools coach them and say, well, we've been talking about brazing and you've brazed 3 times, so now you have experience. No, that is not experience. Don't get me wrong. You learn the fundamentals in trade school, and it is very important that we learn the fundamentals. I'm a true believer in trade schools. I'm a believer that you take a trade school education, you take an apprenticeship, and they work together, and then you become a technician. Okay. Because I can't explain everything. That's what trade schools are for. They're for explaining the nitty gritty and the technical information. You can also read that information in a book, by the way. Okay. If you're a good self-motivated person, you technically don't need trade school. Okay. Because you can read it, you can get hands-on experience working for a company, but it just depends on if a company's willing to hire you that way. So when you're a trade school graduate and you're coming into the trade, plain and simple, you need to understand you don't know what you think you know, and you're going to have to start from the ground up. And there's nothing wrong with that, but just understand that. Okay. Learn how to keep your mouth shut and learn how to open it when it's the right time. Okay. When you're working with someone and you're on a roof and you're changing a compressor, if your senior tech or your senior mechanic or whoever you're working with has time, then ask him questions. But also when he's super busy trying to do something, sometimes that's not the time for questions. You have to kind of gauge it. Okay. And don't be offended. Like I've told people before, when I'm busy working and they're like, how does that work? How does that work? And I'm like, you know what, bud, I can't really explain that right now. Ask me when we're driving home, and then we do the work. Okay. So it's going to take time as a trade school graduate to work your way up. Okay. Be cautious about companies that hire you and throw you in a van immediately and say, just, throw you to the wolves and say, figure it out. Be cautious about that, because you might be able to swim really well, right? But you might just sink to the bottom too. Okay. They have a high turnover rate, those companies. They hire people, they say this person sucks, and they move on. Those are also the companies that say these trade schools don't know how to teach these kids. These trade schools suck. Nobody is ever going to learn everything in a trade school. A trade school, in my opinion, or community college or whatever, is there to give you fundamentals and a basis to build upon. Okay. And then your senior mechanic or the person that you're working with is going to finish your knowledge. That's how it typically works. And that's how it works with me. Okay. So hopefully that is some good advice for you, Jonathan. Feel free to reply to the email if you need more information. Okay. I do want to cut, and I kind of covered it a little bit in the beginning of that, and I want to talk about it a little bit right here. Be cautious about the trade schools, whether they be for-profit or not profit. They give misinformation. Okay. I'm going to tell you guys a story. So, I, in the past, have been on an advisory committee for a local community college to me. Very good college. And advisory committee is where they bring in industry professionals, and there's no students there, and the teachers of the program, and they typically have someone that's from administration come down, and they want to get feedback from contractors and people that are in the industry, manufacturers and different things like that. It's kind of like a show, an open house, right, for a trade school, because they want the local community to give them feedback on the information they're giving to the students. So I was at an advisory meeting, and they had the dean of admissions there, and they had the program director and all this stuff, and they were given advice, and they were discussing a problem that they're having in their program. And they said, because we were talking about the tools that they had. And I was like, guys, the tools that you're teaching these students on are antiquated tools. They were old meters. And, you know, just I was like, you guys need to update your tools. And then the dean kind of chimed in and he said, well, the problem is the tools keep going missing. And I go, okay, so the students are stealing the tools is what you're telling me. And he goes, yeah, they're stealing the tools. So we don't give them the nicest tools because they keep going missing. So we're therefore not going to have nice tools for them to learn on. And I gave him a suggestion and I said, look, why is it that you don't make the students bring the tools to school with them? And he goes, well, why would we do that? And I go, because as a contractor, I require not all the tools, but I require meters and wrenches and different things like that to be brought by the technician to work every single day. So I said, if you want to solve your problem with electric meters going missing, because I highly doubt a vacuum pump's going to go missing, right? It's going to be the small stuff they can put in their pockets. And I go, if you want to solve that problem, require the students to bring them. And he goes, well, we can't do that. And I go, why not? Because I do. I said, the moment they leave your program, I demand that before they come to work for me, they have their basic hand tools, screwdrivers, a meter, gauges. So why not make the students buy those ahead of time, show an effort, and bring them to school? And they said, oh, no, that's not how these schools work. We don't do that. And I go, so you're saying that you guys have to provide the tools? Yeah, but you don't want to provide high quality tools. Well, no, because they keep getting stolen. And I said, are you seeing the problem here? I mean, if you live in an area or your school's in an area where you're having a demographic of people that keep stealing crap, make them bring the stuff, you know? And they just don't get that. So the education system is broken, whether it be community college or for-profit schools. It's broken. And one thing I'm going to tell you guys right now too with the colleges, whether it be community or for-profit, is they don't pay their teachers enough. Now, I know that's a double-edged sword because I'll tell you that I know that some of these places have horrible teachers, but some of them have amazing teachers, okay? But usually, for the most part, the normal teacher, not a program director, but the normal teacher that's teaching a fundamentals to refrigeration class or a fundamentals to air conditioning class, when the students graduate, within a year, they're going to be making more money than the teachers. And that's asinine. That really is. That is ridiculous that these teachers are going to be training these kids on the fundamentals. And typically within a year, they're going to be making more than that teacher. No, that's not right. So money, you know, politics and all kinds of crap needs to change. And they need to figure this out. They also need to get, and I'm not going to go crazy into the politics of this, but they also need to be able to let go of teachers when they suck too. Okay. So that's a whole nother thing. But that's my rant on trade schools. Just be cautious about that stuff. Like I said in the beginning. Okay. Let me get to the chat and see what I'm missing in here. Let's see. He was answering a question to someone else. Tips on how do you set low temperature controls? How to set low temp controls. I don't know what you mean by low temp controls, Corner Mechanical. I mean, it really if it's a temperature controller, it really depends on the space temperature and what type of a sensing bulb it has. I think you might mean low pressure controls, but I'm going to talk about temperature controllers first. So you have to understand the concepts of a temperature controller and how it's meant to operate, okay? Is it an air sensing temperature controller or is it a coil sensing temperature controller? Because that's going to change everything in how you set it, okay? You need to read up on those. I have a video out there on... actually, if you go to hvacrschool.com, that is not my website. That is my buddy Brian Orr's website. He operates the HVAC school website. I'm sorry. Okay, the confusion out here. Brian's website address is hvacrschool.com. Okay, but he calls his YouTube channel HVAC School. All right. So keep that in mind if anybody's out there searching for it. But on Brian's website, hvacrschool.com, he has a podcast, and I did his podcast many years ago. And we talked about different types of temperature controllers. And I really break down the different types, how they work, and what we do with them. So I suggest you look up, go to HVACR School, go into the search feature and look up temperature controllers, and you'll see an article by Chris Stevens, and give that article a read, give the podcast a listen, and it'll explain everything, okay? When it comes to low pressure controls, let's talk about those for a minute too, because I get a lot of questions about that. Pressure controls, it really depends on the application in which you're using them, okay? If it's a pump down system and you're just using the pressure control as a high pressure safety and a low pressure safety, then you just need to look at your pressure temperature chart. I've got one on the wall right here. look at the saturation temperatures of the refrigerant, find out how cold you want the evaporator to be, and set the high and low pressure controls accordingly. Each manufacturer, whether it be Heatcraft or Russell, all of them have different methods at which they want you to set pressure controls. Understand something, that when a pressure control turns on and off, you have to pay attention to outdoor ambient conditions and indoor conditions, because if it's super cold in the evaporator and it's super cold outside, then the refrigerant, the static refrigerant pressure in the system just sitting in the receiver is not going to be very high. Therefore, your low pressure cut-in needs to be set accordingly, because when it's really hot outside, that storage vessel, that receiver, when it's a pump down system, the refrigerant's just sitting in there waiting for a solenoid valve to open up. It's being driven by the pressure and the temperature in the ambient condition in which this receiver is sitting in, okay? But the evaporator temperature downstairs is also a factor in that. So that refrigerant is going to be driven through the system before the compressor turns on based off of the pressure that it is sitting in that receiver. So you have to keep that in mind when you have a system that's located in a really cold environment and it's really cold in the box. You might have to go lower on your cut in and cut out, okay? So keep that in mind. What do we have going on here? I saw something come through right now. Oh, 98 DeVille. Thank you so very much for being a channel supporter for 18 months. Wow, bud, that is awesome. Your guys' support is amazing. If you guys don't know what that is, couple different ways to support these videos in this live stream. The easiest way is watch the videos from beginning to end without skipping through anything. That's the easiest way, because then what happens is YouTube throws commercials in there and they give me a small percentage of the revenue stream from the commercials and I get paid from YouTube, okay? But there's other ways that people choose to support this channel. You can become a YouTube channel member, which is what the 98 DeVille did. He set up a monthly commitment to the channel and said, charge my credit card this much money every single month, and it's his way of supporting the channel. Thank you very much for doing that. There's another method similar to YouTube channel memberships called Patreon. There's links in the show notes of every one of my videos for all these different methods I'm going to talk about. So Patreon's another way that you can support the channel by giving a monthly commitment, and then they just charge your credit card. They give me a percentage of it every single month. You can also go to my website, hvacrvideos.com. We have merchandise available on there. We have beanies, cuffed and non-cuffed. So that's the non-cuffed. This is the cuffed. They just say HVACR and have my snowflake icon on there. We have hats, shirts, sweaters. There's zip-up hoodies, all kinds of different stuff. So that's another way to support the channel. Also, if you guys are interested and you're thinking about purchasing any tools, you can check out TrueTechTools.com. If you like their pricing, I have a discount code, big picture, one word. I get a small commission if you use that discount code. And when you use the discount code, as of today, October 4th of 2021, you'll get an 8% discount on your overall order. So it doesn't matter how much stuff you add into the cart, you get an 8% discount. That 8% discount is also limited on certain items. So some manufacturers don't allow TrueTech to give discounts. So just pay attention to their website. It'll explain it all, okay? And then there's also PayPal. There's links in the show notes of every one of my videos with a PayPal link. You can click that and donate to the channel too. So the 98 DeVille, thank you so very much for being a channel supporter for 18 months, bud. That is awesome. It's amazing that you choose to support this channel. I'm humbled by all of your support. Thank you so very much, okay? Let's go ahead and get back on here. So Zach had asked me if I was going to be at the HVAC school training symposium. So here in February, Brian Orr, who operates HVAC school, is going to have a training. He calls it a symposium. It's really cool training class. Okay. So what he does is he brings in all kinds of educators from all over the place, even silly people like YouTube content creators, right? He'll bring in social influencers. He'll bring in educators, big time educators from Emerson and all these different manufacturers. And they'll give these amazing classes that normally people would have to pay thousands of dollars for. And Brian sets it all up for usually really low fees, like less than a couple $100 a ticket, I think, or something like that. It's not very much at all. And they're amazing events that he does. So I went to it 2 years ago. Last year was canceled, or I didn't go because of COVID. I did an online presentation. So am I going this year? The plan is to go, yes. Now work depending. Okay. So if I can get off work, then yes, I plan on being there. But either way, I am going to be doing a virtual session and or an in-person session. So if I can't make it because of work, then I'll be doing it online and I'll do a training class online. But if I can make it, yes, I will be flying to Florida. I'll spend a couple days out there and I will be at the 2022 HVAC School Training Symposium. I will also, work permitting, be at the AHR trade show in Las Vegas, which is going to be in January. Okay. I will be setting up at the Sporlin booth at the trade show, at the AHR trade show. And I will be doing, the plan is that I'm going to be doing a live stream. They're going to be setting up, they're getting me special internet at their booth and stuff like that. And I'll have tables set up and I'll have a live stream going on. And maybe, just maybe, I'll have guests and friends that show up to that live stream, and we'll be streaming live from the Sporlin booth at different times each day of the AHR trade show. Okay. So keep that in mind. And as we get closer, I'll announce all the information and we'll get it all out there. Okay. So the answer is, the plan is yes, Zach, I will try to be at the KALOS or HVAC School Training Symposium. Zach had also sent me an email earlier in the week, and he asked me about leak sealants, and I answered his email, but I'm going to answer it here too. So he asked me if there was ever an instance at which I would use a leak sealant, and or when would that be? Zach, I answered your question and I'll answer it here again too. I have used a leak sealant in the past. I've used it one time. No, one time? Yeah, I think I've used a leak sealant one time. Much to my dismay, I did not want to use it, but the customer demanded it. I tried to talk them out of using the leak sealant. I gave them the ramifications of using leak sealants. They didn't listen. They wanted me to use it, so I did, and it did not work. Now, as far as I know, it did not cause any system damage, but that customer stopped using me as a contractor shortly after that and found someone else that would do what he wanted the way he wanted it, and so be it, okay? But I prefer not to use any additives in the systems, leak sealants, flushes, acid neutralizers, different things like that. I try not to use any of those. I have used them in the past, different times. I used to use acid neutralizers when you had burnouts and stuff like that, but I choose not to use any of those anymore. And the leak sealants, I choose not to use them. I've used dye a few times. It's a mess and it's a nightmare. I prefer to keep what came in the system, which is oil, refrigerant, and that's it, okay? So whenever possible, I try to stick to the oil and the refrigerant and nothing else, okay? I don't really have anything bad to say about leak sealers, but they scare the heck out of me and I don't want to use them. So be it. Okay. All right. I talked about that one. Let's see what else we got on here. Let me look at the chat and see what I missed. Do most RDI equipment come with the Arctic Fox by KE2 Therm controller? Most of the RDI equipment that I have seen, yes, it does come with the Arctic Fox temperature controller, which is just a rebranded Key to Therm Temp Plus Defrost controller. So yes, that typically is on there. Can I make a class on dealing with difficult customers? Yeah, I mean, that's something we could possibly talk about in the future. I'll write that down. Actually, send me an email. That's the best way to give me show topic ideas. So flip-flop tan line, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com and remind me to talk about it in a video about difficult customers, okay? Let's see what else we got. Miguel Martinez, what's going on, man? How you doing, bud? Let's see. Have I ever worked on Cascade refrigeration systems? Can I explain how they work? I am not an expert on Cascade systems. I've probably gotten my hands on them once or twice, but I'm not going to do it justice if I try to give it an explanation. Essentially, the easiest explanation is that you have one condensing unit cooling another condensing unit. It's not that easy. It's kind of complex, but what they're doing is they're lowering the condensing temperatures, getting more efficiency out of the refrigerants. Oftentimes they will have blended refrigerants with multi-component mixtures. They're weird, okay? But I don't work on them enough to really talk about them enough, so that's going to be something I'm going to have to decline discussing right now. Pablo had asked me a question about why systems that have capillary tubes do not have receivers. Pablo, the simple answer to that question, okay, now I'm not going to say you're never going to see a receiver on a capillary tube system, but typically you're not going to. And it's because a receiver is going to overcomplicate the situation and make you add a crap ton of extra refrigerant that will never be used, okay? So the concept of a receiver is it's a storage vessel. The easiest explanation is that when you have an expansion valve, the expansion valve is going to open and close, so therefore it's going to require more refrigerant or not as much refrigerant depending on the state of the expansion valve, right? So when it doesn't require a lot of refrigerant, the refrigerant gets backed up into the receiver and it just sits there waiting to be used. With a capillary tube system, you typically it's only going to feed at a certain flow rate. It's typically not going to change very much. Yes, as the ambient temperature drives, the pressure increases, so it might flow a little bit faster through that capillary tube, but you're not going to have a lot of extra refrigerant needed. So if you had a receiver on a capillary tube system, you would find that you'd have to put a crap ton of gas in it to get it properly charged, but then that refrigerant would just sit in that receiver for the life of the system. It's just not efficient to have a receiver on a capillary tube system, and it's going to make charging them a lot more difficult. People are going to be confused, so you don't want to have a receiver on a capillary tube system, at least on a normal system. I'm sure that there's some weird engineered system out there that has a capillary tube and a receiver, but typically you're not going to see it, okay? But it's just not, you don't need it. Okay. The whole idea of a receiver is that when the expansion valve needs the extra refrigerant, it provides it and it maintains liquid refrigerant going to that expansion valve at all times. Okay. That's the whole point of having a receiver. Tips for new business owners. I get these questions a lot. I am not a business expert whatsoever. I'm not the best person to give advice about business. Let me look at my phone because I see a text message coming through. Make sure it's not an important one. No, it's not. Okay. As far as new business, so I had someone email me. He's going to become a new business owner and he wants to know my advice. Okay. My advice is probably not going to be the best advice out there, but it's going to be very conservative advice. And that is simply this: do not leverage your life to start a business. That's my advice. Now, most people are going to say that's bad advice. Okay. To each their own. I'm not a believer in living in debt. Okay. I'm just not. We don't operate our business in debt. That's just how we roll. Now, we don't take big gambles. We're not growing leaps and bounds every single day. We're just riding the wave. Okay. That's the way we operate our business. Some is going to say that's the wrong way to operate a business. We're slow and steady. Okay. I turn down work all the time because I know that I can't keep up with it. Okay. There's other people that'll just take everything they can get and burn themselves out. I've done that in the past. I don't want to do it anymore. So my advice for someone starting a business is don't take out a bunch of financing and the person that emailed me, the person that emailed me, forgive me, I don't have your name written down right here, but he has experience. I think he said he had 7 years refrigeration experience. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So hopefully he understands refrigeration and air conditioning very well. And I think he said he did supermarkets and stuff, and he's jumping out and starting his own business. Good for you, bud. Be cautious about leveraging your life. Okay. Cause keep that in mind. Businesses fail. That's part of life. So if you take out a bunch of financing to start your business and you don't know if you're going to succeed, what happens to your family when your business doesn't succeed? Now, of course, you're always going to hope that everything's perfect. Have a safety cushion. Save up a lot of money, man. Be very cautious about leveraging your life and taking out a bunch of financing to start your business. That's scary, okay? Be very cautious about that stuff. How about how to get accounts? Really, I mean, I probably don't have the best advice for that either. Okay. My dad started this business in the late 80s, early 90s, and some of his first customers are still some of our best customers today. Okay. But the best advice I can give about customers is be honest and be truthful and own up to your mistakes, because that is what we've done our entire time we've owned this business. When we make a mistake, we own up to it. We call the customer and say, we screwed up. We messed this up. We're not going to charge you for this. Okay. We do that before they have to ask us about that kind of stuff. So honesty, integrity, treat them like their family, right? Also at the same time, if you're starting a new business, again, there's plenty other places to get better business advice than me, but understand your worth, understand how to price yourself. Okay. You don't necessarily just look at your competition and say, well, they're here, so I'm going to charge that much. That's not necessarily true, because maybe your competition's screwing up and he's not charging enough. Okay. You can't be the cheapest person out there. If you're the cheapest person out there as a business owner, you're going to get a lot of work in the beginning and you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to hurt everybody else just as much as you're hurting yourself, okay? Because the customers are all going to go to you, and you're going to be spinning your wheels because you're not making good money. You're barely surviving. You're getting all the work, and then you can't keep up with the work. It's just going to create a disaster, okay? So price yourself accordingly. There's all kinds of groups out there that explain how to price yourself, looking at your expenses, your overhead, and all that stuff. I am not the best person explaining all that stuff, but just be honest and be fair. Now, you also asked about software. There's hundreds of business softwares out there for starting a business. I personally use an older one called Intuit Field Service Management, powered by Corrigo. Okay. I've used that software for 10 plus years, but I do it a little bit differently. That software has dispatching and scheduling and all this stuff. I don't use any of that stuff, okay? We're a small company. We get a phone call, we generate a work order, we send it to our techs, and they do it, okay? Or sometimes our techs create the work order out in the field. We just call them and say, hey, a service call, come in, create a work order, then they get on it. But Intuit Field Service Management has worked great for us. It's been an amazing software. I've had limited downtime with it. There's been a few times in the 10 plus years we've used it that they had an outage or something, but it's been very minimal. But there's tons of softwares out there. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a month you can spend on softwares, depending on how big your company is, okay? You get into some of these really big ones like Service Titans and different ones like that, you can spend crazy money on those softwares. You can also go the route of making your own software. You could spend $100,000 developing software, but then you have to spend a lot of money maintaining software too. So keep that in mind, okay? There's all kinds of different options out there. If you want to find out more about the different softwares, go to the AHR trade show. Okay, go to a local trade show. We have the iHacky trade show here in Pasadena soon. There's going to be 3 or 4 software developers there. You go to the AHR trade show in Vegas here in January of 2022, and almost every software company is going to be at that trade show trying to get business for themselves, okay? You can find out all kinds of information about those software companies at the AHR trade show for sure, all right? Let me cross that one off my list and see what else we got going on in here. Let me get to the chat and see what's missing in here. Have I ever had a Corel PJES controller get stuck at a certain temperature and stop sensing temperature? Frost HVAC. I can't say that I've ever had one do that identical thing, but I do work on the Corel PJEZ controllers. You see them on Silver King equipment a lot. You'll see them on some Delafield equipment, and some other manufacturers have used them. I can't say anything really bad about the Corel controllers, but I haven't had that specific issue, no. The biggest issue when it comes to temperature controllers in general, whether it be digital or mechanical, is the sensing bulb failures. Whether it be mechanical, it's typically a copper sensing bulb and it breaks or something. The electronic digital thermistors on the electronic controllers, they will often have water intrusion issues and the sensors will fail too. So that's my most common gripe with temperature controllers. Another one that you'll see is manufacturers, the OEM manufacturers of refrigerators, right? The kitchen manufacturers and stuff. They'll make a refrigerator and they'll put a temperature controller on there, and it'll work fine, and it's set up to work fine for the box, but the customers oftentimes don't maintain the equipment. Condensers are dirty, therefore the system runs higher current, it uses more power, and it overloads the controllers and will oftentimes weld the contact shut in the control or just make the contact in the control fail completely. And it's because the controls were designed with no buffer in there. So when the condenser gets dirty, it overamps, boom, the controller will fail. Now, yes, that's the fault of the customer, but at the same time, every manufacturer has these same issues. In a perfect world, these manufacturers, and some have done this, they will install an auxiliary relay. So the temperature controller will control a relay that has higher operating currents that will take the starting and stopping of the compressor a lot smoother than the little relay that's in the control. And when that relay fails, that external relay, it's easy. You just change the external one. You don't have to change the entire expensive control. All right. So I had a question because I mentioned it a few times. Why the heck am I short-handed? People ask. Well, because there's a technician shortage out there. And coming through COVID, I was very reluctant to hire any new technicians, right? I have a technician that was really good, but he decided to go do his own thing and start his business back up, and good for him. He's a really cool guy. I know him. So he went and started his own thing. So I lost one of my main technicians, but because through COVID, I was reluctant to hire someone because I didn't know if the work was going to be there. Now that that technician left, I'm just you know, understaffed right now. And it's okay. It's taking time. I'm working on training an apprentice right now. I have done it in the past and I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to hire out of desperation. I'm desperate right now, right? I can't keep up with the work, but I'm not going to hire someone that's not my perfect fit. Now, if the perfect candidate came across me, then I would hire him in a heartbeat. But most everybody out there doesn't work on the stuff that I work on. They require extra training, and I can only focus on training one person at a time. So I'm focusing hard on training my apprentice, and I'm hoping, I know that by this next summer, he's going to be able to start doing light commercial service calls and stuff. So I'll get him out in a van, and then I'll either hire another technician or another apprentice, and we'll work our way through. But it just takes time, and I don't want to hire out of desperation. Like I've said, I've done that in the past, and it's a struggle. That's all. So, when I charge with R22, because I still use R22 on a regular, why is it that I charge with liquid? I get that question really often. People saying, why are you charging with liquid on R22? All right, there's an old adage, or whatever you want to say. Old school technicians were always very reluctant to charge with liquid refrigerant, especially on these pure gases like R22 and R12. They would always tell you to charge with the vapor refrigerant because you could just literally open up your gauges. You don't have to worry about flooding out the compressor or anything like that, okay? But charging with liquid refrigerant is a good practice because almost every refrigerant out there requires to be charged as a liquid, because most of them are multi-component refrigerants that are blends, okay? 400 series refrigerants. They typically need to be charged in the liquid phase because they have multiple gases in there. And the theory is that one of the gases could boil off faster than the other gases, and you can fractionate the refrigerant. With that being said, most of the refrigerants out there are actually near azeotropic blends, meaning that it's very marginal that they would actually fractionate, but you still want to always focus on charging correctly. So to make things easier, I charge everything with liquid refrigerant, and I just meter the refrigerant into the low side, okay? With the older semi-hermetic compressors that didn't have protections built into them, that was something we had to worry about, and even some of the older hermetically sealed compressors. But modern compressors, whether they be semi-hermetic, whether they be scroll, or even hermetically sealed, they oftentimes have internal components inside of them, somewhat kind of an accumulator built into the compressor, different baffles and different things like that, that protect them from getting flooded back by liquid refrigerant. Okay. So it's almost not, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's almost impossible to slug a compressor when charging with liquid refrigerant these days. Okay. Because most of them have built-in components, accumulators, baffles, different things like that. But it is still, you still got to be careful. Okay. So I typically charge everything with liquid refrigerant. Let's see what else we got in here. As an HVAC tech, how often do I clean condenser coils in my vehicles? Peter Griffin, I clean the condenser in my vehicle 2 to 3 times a year. I usually don't go crazy. You know, it rarely ever gets that dirty. I mean, if it's really windy and dirty outside, then of course I'll look at it, but it's not very often that I clean the condenser in my vehicle. All right, let's see what else we got in here. What am I missing? If you guys haven't already, please smash the thumbs up button, guys. It really does help out the stream. For some reason, I mean, I really don't focus on it too much, but right now the algorithm is doing some weird crap, and the views and everything just dropped off the map this month. So just do me a favor, smash the thumbs up button. It really helps YouTube to realize that I'm actually here. I feel like sometimes they don't even know that I'm here, but then sometimes the algorithm can go crazy and bring in a crap ton of new blood. YouTube does that. They have ups and downs. I've been doing it for a while, so I've learned how to deal with it. And guys, don't get me wrong. I've told everybody out there, and everybody knows that I do make money from ad revenue from these videos, right? So it's an interesting dynamic with that because, like I told my wife, luckily I can recognize it. But when you, and you have to be careful, and I go back and forth with this. When I release a video and you get a lot of views and you get a lot of comments and different things like that, even with social media in general, there's a dopamine release happening in your head, right? Your brain is releasing different things, and it's like, it's a relief to get those views and those likes and whatever, right? But then when you go the opposite, it's like, whoa, it can be depressing really quick. So in the very beginning of YouTube, I used to be obsessed with the numbers, and I've had to learn how to chill out with it, but I still see them, but I just try not to let it get to me anymore. So when you start seeing revenue coming in and you see a significant revenue drop because the algorithm changed or something like that, it's really easy to get caught up in oh my gosh, what's happening? Like that kind of stuff. And I don't let it get to me too much anymore. But like I said, I still recognize that things change, and YouTube goes up and down, and that's just how it happens. But we do the best by encouraging people to smash the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, different things like that. Leave comments, because any interaction helps YouTube to recognize that people are actually watching and interacting with the content. So please give it a thumbs up and help it out, okay? Why is it that these manufacturers are being so cheap when they make this equipment these days? You know, and even I've said it. You know, I have a customer that'll have something that, you know, is 30 years old, and you're like, okay, it's time to replace it. And then I'll have to warn them. But I have to tell you that when I replace this equipment, what I'm going to install, you can't even buy the quality that you used to have. You know, I mean, you've had something in there for 30 years. It's going to last maximum of 10 years when we install the new equipment. Okay. So why is it that manufacturers are making it this cheap? Because we demand it. Us consumers, we demand cheaper, efficient, faster. So therefore the manufacturers have to compete. And once you have, you know, when it comes to refrigerators, right? So for the longest time, you had like 4 major refrigerator manufacturers. And then you had, you know, companies come in that were lowballing everybody. And then you had foreign companies come in, Korean companies, you know, Hispanic companies, different companies from all over the world, right? Coming in and making refrigerators and going cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And what that actually did was you had those top end customers that started seeing drops in revenue. So they had to start making cheaper equipment to compete with these really cheap companies. And it's just a game that goes back and forth. And it's all because we as consumers demand it. Okay. We as consumers made Amazon what it is today because we liked the convenience. We liked how cheap everything was. But guess what? Now that Amazon is here, now that Amazon is established, they are no longer the cheapest person in the market anymore. Okay. Oftentimes I can find whatever I need to buy from somewhere else that's cheaper than Amazon. But guess what Amazon is? Convenient. Okay. So, but we demanded that. We're the ones that gave Amazon their power because we all started using them. We liked the cheaper, the this, the that. And so they drove other people out of business. So then therefore they became the better one. Same thing with these other cheaper manufacturers of refrigerators. Okay. I'm not going to name names. You guys can name them in the chat, but you have tons of these manufacturers. In fact, some of you guys in the chat, I've had phone conversations about some of these cheap ass manufacturers. But they are hurting the entire industry because, like I said earlier, don't be the cheapest contractor out there because you're going to get all kinds of work, but then you're not going to be able to keep up. Your quality is not going to be there and all that stuff. And that's the same thing that's happening with these really, really cheap manufacturers of equipment because their pricing, the big guys are having a hard time keeping up. So the big guys have to lower their quality. And it's just us that demands this stuff. Yes, you can say it's corporate greed and all that stuff, but inevitably it's us, the consumers. We're the ones that are making the manufacturers make this equipment cheap. Okay. Why is it that I get frustrated, and I'll show it in videos sometimes, when I get service calls that are like overtime service calls? Why am I frustrated? Why did I plan to go out to dinner when I was on call? Okay. Well, first off, I'm human. And it's natural human reaction to be frustrated when you have to go to work at midnight or 2 in the morning. Okay. Yes, that is part of my job description, but it's still frustrating and it's okay to vent that frustration. I don't vent it to the customer. I know I vent it to you guys because you're my audience and we talk, you know, we communicate, and I tell you that it's okay to be frustrated so long as you're not being a jerk to the customers. Okay. But at the same time, a little insight into my situation. I'm understaffed, like I've said many times. And currently right now, I have a 5-week rotation, okay? I used to have 5 service techs, but I don't anymore, okay? Right now, I have 2 service technicians, myself included, an apprentice and a maintenance person, okay? And an install guy. So with that being said, only 2 of us are on call. But I still keep the 5-week rotation because I don't want to wear out my other guy. So as of right now, I'm on call 4 weeks in a row. My other technician takes 1 week. Okay. Now we're changing it up as the summertime is slowing down. My other technician wanted to take another on call. So now he's going to be taking 2 of the on calls and I'll still take 3 of them. And then I'm actually going to throw my apprentice into one of those and do calls with him. And that's something that I do with my apprentice. When he gets to the point that I feel comfortable because he's already in his own van and he just follows me around, I'll start putting him into the on-call rotation and I'll give him a half-hour head start. Go out to the service call, introduce yourself to the manager, get your hands wet, get your feet in the door, start looking at it, and then I'll show up after and I'll do the calls with them. That's part of my apprenticeship and training program. So with that being said, the reason why I'm frustrated is because I'm burnt out. I'm exhausted because I'm on call all the time, and it gets frustrating. So if I'm on call 4 weeks in a row, how do I ever make plans or do anything with my family? And my family should be coming first. Okay. Unfortunately, it's a delicate balance between the business and the family, because the family lives the lifestyle they live because of how hard I work in the business. So it's a give and take on that one. But I'm on call 4 weeks in a row. I try to spend some time with my family. So occasionally I'll take a gamble and go do something. And then sometimes it bites me in the butt. So I vent my frustrations. It's life. It's how it is. Okay. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. How's the apprentice doing? The apprentice is doing great, man. He really is. I'm really ecstatic about his progress. So we're happy about that. Am I saying you are evil? Sure. Money, money, money. That's right. I'm assuming you're talking about the Amazon effect that I was talking about earlier. All right, everybody. It is time. I am going to wrap this one up. I'm exhausted and I need to go eat dinner. And I got to go play with my new puppy. If you guys didn't already see, go back to the very beginning. I have a new puppy that I just got, and I brought him home today. So I'm going to go hang out with him, go eat some dinner. And we will catch you guys on the next one, okay? I'm going to cue up the outro music. And let me turn this on, turn that off. And we will catch you guys on the next one, okay? I actually went to go grab my puppy and bring him in here, but my wife and daughter actually left to go pick up my oldest daughter, and they took the puppy with them. So I got no puppy to show. But go back to the beginning of the stream. Just fast forward, rewind back to the beginning. You'll see the puppy in there, and you'll see him more off as the streams go on and stuff. Eventually, he'll be sleeping in the back like my old dog used to sleep. So yeah, that's it. I'll cue up the outro music again. I really appreciate every one of you. It's amazing and so humbling, the support that you guys all give. So thank you so very much. And remember the HVAC Overtime Show, Friday evening, 6:05 p.m. Pacific time on the HVAC Overtime YouTube channel. And we will catch you guys on the next one.